Your 30s are not your growth decade. They are your load-bearing decade. That is the first truth I want to put in your face, because most people spend these years under a fatal illusion. They think their 30s are a prettier version of their 20s, better salary, better furniture, better zip code, better job title, better vacations with more expensive photos. They think life is finally opening up. Number life is getting heavy. This is the decade when the structure starts carrying real weight mortgage applications, childcare bills, retirement decisions that stop being theoretical, aging parents, insurance, college planning, health that is no longer infinitely forgiving, career choices that begin echoing for decades. One minute you feel relieved that you are finally earning real money. The next minute you realize that every dollar has 10 hands pulling at it, and none of them care about your stress level. That is why I call your 30s the load-bearing decade. In construction, a load-bearing wall is not decorative. It is not there to impress guests. It holds the structure up. If that wall is weak, the whole building starts lying to you. Floors sag before they collapse. Cracks show up before the house fails. Doors stop closing cleanly. Weight shifts where it should not. The damage begins quietly and then suddenly feels obvious. That is what bad money structure in your 30s looks like, not one dramatic explosion. A decade of hidden stress that later reveals itself as panic, dependency, and expensive regret. Most people do not understand this while it is happening. They think their problem is that adulthood is expensive. That is true. But incomplete. The deeper problem is that many adults enter the load-bearing decade with a decorative financial life instead of a structural one. They have income but not reserves. They have credit but not discipline. They have a mortgage plan but not a long-range capital plan. They have a lifestyle but not immunity to lifestyle inflation. They have children but no education funding strategy. They have assets but no estate documents. They have careers, but they neglect the body that produces the income. Then they wonder why their 40s and 50s feel like they are carrying wet concrete uphill. I have spent my life allocating capital, and I will tell you something blunt. A strong financial life is not built by how sophisticated you sound. It is built by what weight your structure can carry without bending. In your 20s, the structure can be sloppy and life may forgive you. In your 30s, forgiveness gets expensive. That is why I want you to stop asking the childish question, not how do I look successful, not how much can I afford, not even what should I invest in first. Ask the adult question, can my wall carry what is coming? If the answer is unclear, then your job is not to polish the paint. Your job is to reinforce the wall. The first crack I want you to look at is consumer debt. Nothing weakens a load-bearing decade faster than trying to hold up the future while still carrying the dumb weight of your past credit cards. Car loans that were really status loans, furniture financing from 3 years ago that you have somehow convinced yourself was normal student loans, that still sit there like a tax on earlier ambition, personal loans taken because life outran discipline. All of that weight is hanging off a wall that is supposed to be supporting your entire adult structure. I want you to do the arithmetic the way an owner does. If you are paying $400 a month in credit card payments and $600 on a car loan, that is $1,000 a month of load that contributes nothing to the strength of the structure. Over a year, that is $12,000. Over a decade, that is $120,000 before you even count what that money could have become had it been routed toward ownership instead of toward old consumption. People love to tell me debt is manageable, so is carrying bricks in your backpack while running stairs. Manageable is not the standard. Intelligent is the standard. Your 30s are when life becomes operationally complex. Work is more demanding. Relationships become more serious. Children may appear. Parents begin needing help. Homeownership introduces repairs, replacements, surprise leaks, and all the other ways a structure reminds you it exists. This is not the decade to be financially handcuffed to the ghost of your own bad purchasing behavior. I learned long ago that debt is not only interest, it is obedience. A person with heavy consumer debt does not negotiate from strength. He accepts work he dislikes because cash flow must keep feeding the machine. He postpones intelligent risk because the wall is already carrying too much. He says yes to pressure because he has no breathing room. He cannot help family calmly because every emergency threatens his own balance. That is not a strong adult. That is an adult with a nice shirt standing under a weak beam. The first major reinforcement in your 30s is simple and brutal. Consumer debt goes to zero. The mortgage, if you have one, is a separate engineering discussion, Everything else is loose weight tied to a structural wall that should be carrying your future, not your old impulses. The second reinforcement point is credit quality. People say credit scores do not matter if you are not planning to borrow. That is the kind of sentence financially lazy people love because it makes neglect sound philosophical. The truth is uglier in your 30s. Your credit score is not a vanity number. It is a cost of structure number. A weak score turns shelter, insurance, borrowing, and flexibility into more expensive versions of themselves. Consider a $400,000 house. With excellent credit, maybe you qualify around 6.5%. With merely pretty good credit, maybe you face 7%. That half-point difference can mean something like $50,000 more in interest over the life of a 30-year mortgage, $50,000 for the exact same house, same roof, same walls, same kitchen, same neighborhood, different habits, different cost. That is not a small penalty. That is the system charging you rent for sloppiness, and the damage can come from one stupid month. One payment more than 30 days late can crush a strong score by roughly 180 points and stay on the record for years. People ruin decade-level borrowing power because they treated one due date as a suggestion. That tells you everything you need to know in your 30s. Attention to detail is not a personality quirk. It is a financial weapon. An excellent credit score is not built with genius. It is built with punctuality, bills on time. Utilization low, old accounts kept alive when rational. New accounts opened only with purpose. Again boring, again structural. That is how real wealth is built. The public is addicted to excitement. Wealth is addicted to reliability, but do not stop at debt and credit. A wall can still fail if it has no blueprint. That brings me to the most neglected reinforcement of all, a comprehensive long-range plan. I do not mean a vague feeling that you should probably save more. I mean an actual 30-year view, budgeting, retirement trajectory, tax awareness, estate structure, progress tracking. You can package those ideas however you want. But the underlying truth is the same. By your 30s, you are no longer managing a handful of expenses. You are managing a growing financial ecosystem. And ecosystems collapse when there is no architecture. Most adults play financial whack, a mole. Whatever screams loudest this month gets the hammer. Rent this month, car repair next month, vacation guilt the month after, child care surge. Insurance spike, tax surprise, then market fear, then a new debt payoff idea, then a bonus that gets spent because we deserved it. That is not planning. That is reacting while pretending reaction is strategy. A plan does something far more valuable than optimize returns. It keeps your structure coherent. When a raise comes, the plan tells the new money where it belongs. When a bonus lands, the plan prevents emotional vandalism. When a crisis hits, the plan tells you which accounts exist for defense and which are untouchable. When your family grows, the plan updates the load distribution. When your parents age, the plan shows how much margin you truly have. Without a plan, your income is just stronger paint on the same weak wall. The next reinforcement is cash reserves. And here most people remain dangerously adolescent. They say they have an emergency fund because they have a couple $1,000s in checking and a belief that nothing too bad will happen at once. That is not an emergency fund. That is denial with a debit card in your 20s. Maybe 3 to 6 months of expenses was enough advice. In your 30s. I want you thinking larger and more honestly. 6 to 12 months of living costs is not paranoia. It is load-bearing realism. Houses break, cars fail. Children need urgent care. Work changes. Income becomes variable. Parents need help. Surprise travel happens. Opportunity sometimes appears with a price tag and a deadline. A thin buffer does not just create financial pain. It creates decision weakness. I have always valued optionality, and optionality begins with reserves. A strong reserve fund changes your posture. You negotiate differently when you know one bad month will not send you into debt. You think more clearly when every repair is not a moral crisis. You can take a calculated career risk because you have time. You can help family from strength instead of panic. You can say no to an ugly boss because your structure does not depend on immediate obedience. That is why a reserve fund is not dead money. It is position money. It is leverage without borrowed money. It is breath. And for the people who roll their eyes and say they would rather invest every spare dollar, I have a short answer. An emergency fund is not there to maximize return. It is there to keep you from liquidating long-term assets, missing payments, or entering expensive debt when ordinary life behaves like ordinary life. You are not supposed to get rich off your reserves. You are supposed to remain structurally intact when the wind changes. After reserves, we come to retirement, which is where many adults commit the laziest sin in personal finance. They treat time like an infinitely renewable resource. It is not. Your 30s are the last decade where contribution size and compounding time can still cooperate in a generous way. Delay too long and the wall does not merely sag. It starts demanding larger and larger emergency repairs later. A useful benchmark is to aim for something like 3 times your annual salary saved for retirement by age 40. If your annual pay is around $62,000, you are looking at roughly $186,000 by then. Does that exact number determine your destiny number? But it tells you whether the wall is beginning to carry future weight or whether it is still pretending. What matters here is not the milestone as a trophy. It is what the milestone represents: time in the machine. Get a real sum working by 40 and the following decades become much kinder. Keep contributing and compounding has something to amplify. Wait too long and every future contribution must work harder because the machine had fewer years to run. People love to admire compound interest in theory. Very few show it the one thing it demands in exchange for miracles: time. That is why every raise matters, every bonus matters, every job change matters. If your contributions do not rise as income rises, then your lifestyle is getting promoted while your future stays in the same chair. That is not maturity, that is internal sabotage. This is why I insist on what I call lifestyle inflation immunity. Your 30s are the decade when social pressure becomes expensive. Better salary, nicer apartment, better bonus, nicer car, better title, better restaurants, better vacations, better neighborhood, better everything. Before long, a person making 6 figures somehow feels as cash, strapped as he did years earlier making far less. Why? Because his wall never strengthened. He just hung more decorative weight on it. I have seen people making remarkable incomes live in constant tension because every increase in earning created an equal increase in expectation. They did not become wealthier, they became more expensive. That is a terrible trade. A strong structure does not absorb every raise into lifestyle. It captures at least part of every raise for reinforcement. Automate half the increase toward savings and investments before the ego notices. That one habit changes entire decades. A $5,000 raise can become more spending or more future. The amount is identical. The life produced by the routing is not. That is what immunity means, not deprivation resistance. A person immune to lifestyle inflation can still enjoy life. He just refuses to let every new dollar immediately purchase a more fragile identity. And now we arrive at a part people avoid because it feels morbid, which is precisely why it matters. Estate planning, if you have children, significant assets, a mortgage, a spouse, or any other human beings whose lives would be affected by your absence or incapacity, then not having the basic documents in place is an act of laziness disguised as optimism. A will, powers of attorney, health directives, beneficiary coordination, guardianship decisions if children are involved, that is not old person paperwork, that is adult structure. You do not build a load-bearing wall and then shrug when someone asks whether the roof is actually connected to it. Without documents, courts and bureaucracies make decisions that should have been made by you. People who spent years building a family structure suddenly hand the final switchboard to strangers because they disliked uncomfortable paperwork. That is foolish. Something simple is infinitely stronger than nothing elegant imagined but never executed. The next reinforcement point is the one the culture dismisses until the bill arrives. Health. Your body is the labor engine that supports the wall. Damage the engine and the wall weakens, no matter how good the spreadsheet looked. Americans spend staggering sums on health care over a lifetime. If you reduce that even modestly through prevention, sleep, nutrition, movement, and basic sanity, the savings are not trivial. More importantly, the income preservation and decision quality preservation are even larger. People act as if paying for decent food, training, checkups, or stress management is indulgence. Then they treat disease management as an unavoidable line item later. That is backward. Preventive investment is often cheaper than delayed repair. And it preserves your most important productive asset, the body and mind that produce earnings and make decisions. This matters especially in your 30s because this is when decline begins disguising itself as normal fatigue. You gain a little weight, recover slower, sleep worse, move less, tolerate more stress. Tell yourself this is just life and keep feeding the machine. Then one day you realize your health has been depreciating quietly while you were busy optimizing everything else. A weak body is a weak wall. It limits earning power, risk capacity, and joy all at once. And if you have or plan to have children, you must also face education planning. College costs have grown like a weed because the culture pretends future tuition is a tomorrow problem. It is not, it is a clock problem. Something like $40,000 a year for a public option with living costs, and far more for private schooling, is not fiction anymore. Start early, use tax-advantaged education vehicles when appropriate, and let time do its work. A 529-style structure is not exciting, but tax-free growth for qualified education is exactly the sort of quiet advantage adults should respect. You do not have to fully solve the whole problem at once. You do have to stop acting like time will. That is the recurring theme of your 30s. Stop expecting time to solve what structure should solve. Now let me tell you what all these reinforcements are really building toward. Not a net worth number, not a social media version of being set, financial confidence, real confidence, not swagger. The kind where you know your numbers, you know your obligations, you know what happens if the market falls, you know what happens if a child needs something expensive, you know where the reserves sit, you know your insurance gaps, you know whether you are on track or behind, you know what your next move is after a raise, after a bonus, after a debt payoff, after a family change. Confidence is not the absence of risk. It is the presence of structure. People who lack this confidence live in a permanent fog. Every market drop feels existential. Every big expense feels like bad luck instead of forecastable life. Every financial decision becomes emotionally expensive because they do not know how the pieces fit together. They are not only short of money, they are short of coherence. Your 30s are when you either build coherence or spend the next 3 decades paying premiums for its absence. That is why I get impatient with people who treat these years casually. They say they are too busy. Of course you are. That is the whole point. A load-bearing decade is supposed to feel heavy, but heavy is not an excuse for weak structure. Heavy is the reason structure matters. And now I want to show you the hidden mechanism beneath all of this, because most people never see it. Every one of these milestones is doing one of two things. It is either removing load from the wall or increasing the wall's capacity. Paying off consumer debt removes load. Excellent credit reduces future load by making large obligations cheaper. Planning increases capacity because it directs weight intelligently. Emergency reserves increase capacity by absorbing shocks. Retirement savings reduce future load because later life will demand less from labor. Lifestyle inflation immunity removes unnecessary load before it hardens. Estate planning stabilizes the structure for the people attached to it. Health investment increases the engine's capacity. Education planning removes future parental load. Confidence increases your ability to make rational structural decisions under pressure. This is not a list. It is one machine. That is why you should stop asking which milestone is most important. The more intelligent question is where your wall is weakest. Right now, if you are drowning in consumer debt, that crack matters more than education planning. If you have children and no will, that weakness is serious. If your job is variable and you have 1 month of reserves, the reserve crack may be the loudest. If your salary has doubled but your retirement contributions barely moved, that is a silent structural failure disguised as success. The beautiful thing about seeing your financial life this way is that it eliminates moral confusion. You stop judging yourself emotionally and start evaluating structurally, not am I good with money? Where is the wall under reinforced? That question is useful. And let me tell you something else nobody says clearly enough. Your 30s are also when your environment starts trying to weaken the wall deliberately. Social comparison, parenting guilt, housing pressure, career ambition, consumer culture dressed up as adulthood, people around you buying things they cannot afford with calm faces, entire cities normalizing financial absurdity. Everybody seems to be making it work, so you assume weakness is normal. It is normal. It is also dangerous. Normal is not the same as intelligent. A whole generation can normalize weak walls if enough people keep repainting the cracks. You do not need to join them. I have always believed in the inner scorecard, and this decade tests whether you actually have one. Can you drive a less impressive car because the wall matters more than appearances? Can you keep an old card open because credit history matters more than symbolic tidiness? Can you redirect raises automatically because future structure matters more than present applause? Can you maintain reserves instead of reaching for them every time a sale or trip tempts you? Can you write the will, buy the insurance, schedule the checkup, fund the 529, and increase the retirement contribution, even though none of those things make for glamorous conversation? That is what adulthood looks like. not aesthetic maturity, structural maturity. I want to press one final issue because it is where many people collapse. They believe one good salary solves all of this. It does not. Income helps, of course, but income without routing is just stronger current in the same bad plumbing. A person earning $150,000 with debt, weak reserves, sloppy credit habits, no estate plan, no retirement urgency, and no lifestyle discipline may feel powerful for a while. He is not. He is a large house built on a weak wall. The first serious storm reveals the truth. Meanwhile, somebody earning far less can be quietly building something stronger. Debt shrinking, reserves growing, contributions automatic, documents signed, spending measured, health maintained. That person may not look rich at 34, but by 44 or 54 the structure tells the truth. This is the cruelty and beauty of compounding. It amplifies structure weakness compounds. So does discipline. Now let us talk about what happens if you ignore this decade. You drift through your 30s spending just enough attention to avoid immediate disaster. Debt lingers, credit stays decent but not excellent. No clear long-term plan, emergency savings thin, retirement funded irregularly. Every raise partially consumed, no estate documents, health treated casually, no college strategy. The wall does not collapse immediately. That is why people stay in this pattern so long. It merely carries weight badly. Then the 40s arrive. Children get more expensive, parents get older, career pressure becomes more political, health costs rise, the retirement gap becomes harder to close because time is less generous, an expensive mortgage feels less adventurous and more binding. A layoff becomes more psychologically violent because the structure was never built for a long disruption. This is when people start saying they feel behind. Usually they are not behind because one bad thing happened. They are behind because the wall was asked to carry more and more without ever being reinforced properly. And then they start chasing miracles. They want the hot stock, the big raise, the side hustle savior, the business idea, the crypto catch-up trade, the aggressive real estate move, the heroic solution. I do not like heroic solutions for weak structure. I prefer reinforcement. Reinforcement is not sexy, but it works. Eliminate the consumer debt, protect the credit, build the plan, thicken the reserve, increase the retirement load, bearing capacity, immunize the lifestyle. Get the estate documents done, invest in the body, fund the education line if children are in the picture. Build enough confidence that you no longer tremble every time life changes shape. That is how you win the decade. And once you see it this way, the whole conversation changes. You stop treating your 30s like a race against peers and start treating them like an engineering phase. Nobody asks whether a bridge beam feels inspired today. Nobody asks whether the concrete wants a vacation. Nobody asks whether the support column would rather spend its resources on granite countertops and a nicer car. The structure is built because the weight is coming. That is what your 30s are. Weight coming, you can either meet it with adult reinforcement or with decorative denial. So here's the test I want to leave you with. Look at your current life the way I would look at a business balance sheet. Not with sentiment, not with shame, not with excuses. Where is the wall cracking? Is it the debt? Is it the lack of reserves? Is it your credit laziness? Is it the absence of a real long-term plan? Is it retirement neglect? Is it lifestyle inflation disguised as enjoying the fruits of my labor? Is it no will, no powers of attorney, no structure for the people you claim to love? Is it a body that is slowly becoming more expensive to maintain because you kept choosing convenience over strength? Is it the tuition clock ticking with no response? Is it that you still cannot say with a straight face that you understand your own financial life well enough to feel calm? Find the crack? Then reinforce the wall before more weight arrives, because the weight is coming whether you are ready or not. That is the part nobody negotiates with. Children do not become cheaper because you feel stressed. Mortgages do not care that you are tired. Parents do not age on your preferred timeline. Markets do not suspend volatility until you feel organized. Your body does not freeze at 32 because you are busy. Time does not slow down for underbuilt structures. That is why these years matter so much. Your 30s are not the decade where life asks whether you have taste. They are the decade where life asks whether you have reinforcement. And if you build the wall correctly, something extraordinary happens later. Your 40s feel less panicked. Your 50s feel less trapped. Your 60s feel more chosen than endured. Not because life becomes easy, but because the structure no longer lies. It carries what it was built to carry. Most people want a comfortable future. Very few are willing to build load-bearing years. Be one of the few. The wall is either getting stronger right now or it is learning how to fail. Choose which one your 30s will be.